Hey boys and girls, how are you doing this week? I am still missing you so much. But do you know what? I have loved getting to make these videos for you, and I have absolutely loved getting to see a lot of your artwork that your parents are sending to me. You all are doing such a fabulous job. I can't wait to make something new with you today. I've got my paper here and a marker, and there is a hint on my desk of what we are going to be making. Would you like to take a guess? Did you guess flowers? That's exactly right. We're going to be making a beautiful springtime flower garden. First, we need to learn how to draw some flowers for our garden. So get your supplies, paper, pencil, pen, and come back with me. See you in a minute. Before we get started, you want to find some paper to use today. You're going to need one paper that you are going to make your finished project on, and then find some other paper that you can use to practice drawing the flowers. We'll begin by practicing drawing different types of flowers on a separate sheet of paper, and then we'll move to another piece of paper for your final project. Okay, so the first flower that we're going to draw together is a daisy. And what I want to do for a daisy is look at the picture and think about what a daisy looks like. A daisy has a circle for the middle, right? And then one characteristic about a daisy is it has long, thin petals, sort of like that. So you want to make sure, if you want it to look like a daisy, that it has long, thin petals. Have you ever found that it's kind of hard to draw petals all the way around and have them all face the direction they're supposed to be going? Sometimes that's hard, isn't it? So I have a little trick for you today that you can do. What I like to do to make the petals all radiate out from the center, instead of having them all curved to one side, which can sometimes happen, is I like to start by making petals on opposite sides. So I made one over here. Now I'm going to draw a long skinny daisy petal right across from it. So right now it kind of looks like a propeller, doesn't it? But now what I want to do is I want to make ones on the opposite side, kind of like I'm making a letter T. So I'm going to come down here with a long skinny daisy petal, and I'm going to come across over here. And it might seem odd at first, like that does not look like a flower, but what we're going to do now is fill in between the petals. This makes it much easier to fill in the petals where they're all facing the right direction. This is just a little hint or a little hack for you guys if you ever struggle with making your petals going the right way. Sometimes they like to get curvy, don't they? Now, something I want to point out is all flowers, their petals are a certain shape, but they're not all going to be perfectly identical. Each petal is going to take on a little bit of a personality of its own. That's just the way things in nature are. Even though they're going to be the same shape, they're not going to be all perfectly the same. And that's a good thing, isn't it? It's good when we have a little bit of variety in our lives, right? Okay, so now I've got these petals that go all the way around. There's a daisy that's big and open. Now, something else I can do is I can add a stem to this. When I draw stems, I like to draw two lines so that I have something I can color in. If I only draw one line for a stem, I don't have anything to color in. Now, you can look up pictures of daisy leaves, or you can just make your own shape, okay? That's totally acceptable. I didn't look up any pictures of daisy leaves, so I'm just making up my own. One other way you can draw a daisy is to draw it from the side. So now I'm making an oval shape because I'm going to be making this daisy like I can only see it from the side. So now I'm making an oval, which is kind of like a sideways view of a circle. And I'm going to make my long stems coming outwards, but only from about the side down. And when you do this, you're going to end up with a daisy that you are looking at from the side. So imagine that on the other side, there's a lot of petals that look just like this folded down on the other side. And of course, you can add in a stem for that too. Stems don't have to be straight. Stems can be curved. So you can play around and practice with a daisy shape. All right, next, let's talk about a rose. So a rose is a beautiful flower that we can find in the garden, and they come in lots of different colors. So it'll be really fun to color these on your paper because you can choose lots of different colors. So a rose, when I think about a rose, I first think about the middle looking kind of like a spiral. All of the petals in a rose kind of spiral out from the center. So let's look at what we could do about that. Remember, I'm drawing pretty big on my paper, but if you have a smaller paper, feel free to make your drawings a lot smaller when you practice. All right, so for a rose, what I like to do to start is kind of start with a little spiral. So notice I started with this point right here and I just kind of spiraled around, okay? Now, what I like to do is I like to add in little wavy lines to make petals that are close together. In the center of a rose, all the petals are going to be close together, and as you go outwards, they're going to get a little bit bigger. So go ahead, if you want to pause the video and practice making a spiral. Let me do another one over here. And then you can practice making some wavy shapes that are close to the center. They don't branch out too far. These are going to be the starting petals for your rose. Okay? Once you get those done, then the next petals that you draw, you can make them come out a little bit farther. Look at how this wavy line I created for a petal has a lot more space in it than these lines right here. Now, is there one perfect way to draw a rose? No, absolutely not. There are ways that you can draw a rose that are different from this. I'm just showing you one way that you can draw it if you would like. Now, as I'm finishing this rose, it's getting big enough. So I'm going to keep that in mind, and I'm going to make my last few little petals coming out be kind of wide and farther away. And then once I feel like it looks like it's finished, I can stop. So I'm going to stop right there. On this one over here, I'm going to show you that again. I'm going to keep adding, going around, kind of wherever I feel like it needs a petal. So you're just going to have to use your eyes and your mind to add in the petals wherever you feel like it needs one. If it looks too heavy on the sides, come down and draw a petal on the bottom. Are these petals a perfect shape? No, they're just wiggly lines made into a petal shape. And when you feel like your rose is finished and you've added enough, you can stop, okay? Now let's talk about rose stems. So rose stems are going to have something kind of prickly on them. Any guesses what that something kind of prickly is? Thorns, exactly. If you reach into a rose bush and try to pick a rose, you're going to be disappointed. It's kind of dangerous to stick your hand directly into a rose bush because they have these little thorns. So if you'd like to draw little triangle shapes down the side of your rose, you can do that. I'm going to make these edges a little bit jagged on my leaves. I kind of like the way that that looks for a rose. So I'm gonna make my lines just a little more jagged. Is it perfect? No. Is that okay? Absolutely. We are trying our best. And if you want to add in a few thorns, feel free to do that. You can make more leaves and more thorns until you like the way it looks. Feel free with your parents to use the computer and look up more images of roses if you would like to see what their leaves look like, or if you would like to see some of the different color varieties that you can find. All right, the next flower that we are going to draw together is called a lily. There are lots of different types of lilies, so the one that we draw together today may not look like all the lilies you can find, but it will be a very, very nice lily that we can draw together. A lot of my girls are named Lily at school. If you're a Lily watching this, hello, and I miss you. Now, what we're going to do for a lily is lilies have very big petals. Before I draw the flower, I'm going to practice drawing a lily petal. A lily petal is a little more pointy on the end and a little more round the closer it gets to the center. Before you draw your lily, if you want to practice making some lily-shaped petals, you can do that, okay? And then what we'll do is we'll create the whole lily right here. Okay, so we're gonna put the lily right here, and I'm gonna start with a very small little oval, just a very small oval. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this shape that we practiced, which is a pointier end, and I'm gonna make some really large lily petals. If you look at the picture of the lily, the petals are really nice and big. So I'm just going around my lily, and it helps to practice this a couple times. If you feel like yours doesn't look right on the first try, please just practice it again. Don't get discouraged. Everything will be fine. Now in the center, I'm going to draw a line. It comes out from the center and it comes down the middle of each lily. And then I'm gonna add some little black line marks. Some lilies have some markings on them. I'm gonna keep these kind of concentrated near the line. I think this kind of makes your lily have a little bit more interest to it. It has these cool markings on it. And then after I do these little markings, I can decide whatever color I wanna make my lily. Feel free to look up pictures of different varieties of lilies and what color they are. Now in the very center, lilies are gonna have some little lines, curved lines with a colored end. I drew those right on top, okay? Lily stems are very strong and thick. And then of course they'll have some leaves on them. So you can practice making some different lilies for your garden. All right, next I want to talk about a sunflower. A sunflower is a compound word, isn't it? We have sun and we have flower that create this word. So a sunflower has a very large center circle. So I'm gonna start with a larger circle this time. And the petals of a sunflower are pointy, kind of like a daisy, but they're not as long. So as compared, the middle is a lot bigger than the petals. So for the sunflower, I'm going to make a pointy petal that's short, kind of like that. And we're gonna use the same trick I used for the daisy. I'm going to come down to the bottom and I'm going to make a petal down here. And then I'm gonna come out and make one from each side. And we're left with this crazy looking thing. But now we're gonna go back and we're gonna fill in between with more petals, okay? Remember, like I said about the daisy, it's okay if all the petals are not exactly identical, okay? They are going to be roughly the same shape and size, but each one is gonna have a little bit of its own personality. You notice that I'm leaving a little bit of space between some, and some are pretty much touching. That is 100% okay, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back in just a minute, and we're gonna add a second layer of petals. So right now, I have filled in one layer of petals, and for a sunflower, they have a second layer, or maybe 3 layers, I don't know, you'd have to look that up, hiding behind. So I just drew those, but let me explain to you what I did. I just found 2 petals, and now I'm pretending that I'm drawing that same petal shape, but only what I can see. So I can't see the bottom of the petal shape that's hiding behind these. I can only see where it's peeking out at the top. Now some I can see a little bit more because those petals were farther apart. But the petals that are closer together, I can't see as much of the petal behind it that is peeking through. Pretty cool, right? So you have to go around and you're gonna make sure that you went in between each petal. I may have doubled up somewhere in there, but that's okay. No problem, okay? And once I've gone around my whole sunflower, making sure that I've drawn petals in between, now I'm going to take my pencil or pen or marker or whatever you're using, and around the outer edge of this big circle, I'm going to draw little dots. Now, in the middle of a sunflower, it has all these seeds, and it kind of, if you look at the picture, you can see how it's made out of a lot of little dots, but the outer edge is darker than the rest of the center. The center circle, the outer edge of it is darker than the very center. So when I color this in, this is gonna help the outer edge look just a little bit darker. Sunflowers are very tall and they have very thick, tall stems so that they can stretch way up in the sky. These are gonna be some of the tallest flowers in your garden. Okay, so now that we have drawn a bunch of different flowers, you have great ideas to get started, and you may even have ideas for flowers on your own. That's wonderful. Anything that you want to add is great. You don't have to only draw the flowers that I showed you. Now, first thing that you need to decide before you draw your garden is, do you want to draw your garden, like we say in class, tall like a door? That's vertical. Or you could turn your paper and you could draw it, what we say in class is wide like a fish tank, or the other word for that is horizontal. So you decide if you would like your garden to be vertical or horizontal, and it does not matter which way. Now what you get to do is you get to combine these different types of flowers, and we get to use a little bit of overlapping. Overlapping is when something is in front of something else in our picture. We talk about that a lot. So as you're drawing your garden today, you're gonna wanna keep in mind that you may want to have a bit of overlapping. Now, I am going straight in with a marker to draw this. Do you have to go straight in with a marker to draw yours? Absolutely not. You can totally start with a pencil. If you don't have a black marker, you can, when you're done with pencil, you can trace over it with a crayon to make it darker, or a pen, or you don't have to trace over it at all. That is not necessary to finish this project, okay? All right, so now I'm just taking time to draw in some different flowers. I know, for instance, what did we say the tallest flower in our garden would be? A sunflower, right? If you would like to use a sunflower, you may want to consider making it the tallest flower in your garden. So as I'm drawing these things in, you can watch me. I will speed up the video, okay? But after you watch me draw, you get started on making your own, and please make this your own flower garden. You do not have to draw it exactly as I'm drawing it. I want to see your ideas shine through. Remember to make good use of the space on your page. We want some of our flowers to be up tall, filling up our page, and we want some flowers to be in the middle and some to be towards the bottom. Okay, I'm going to stop here and speed up the video. You're free to watch this or go ahead and get started on your own. if you'll notice that I left these two flowers at the top without a stem, that's because I wanted to make sure that I could put some flowers in front of them since I'm drawing with a marker. If I was drawing with a pencil, I could have gone ahead and drawn a stem for them and then just gone back and erased where I needed to. But that's why I left these without a stem for a minute. So now I can go back and I can add a stem behind the flowers that they are going behind, okay? Now, as your page gets more full and you are getting closer to being finished, you can decide what other types of things your picture needs. Where are there empty spots where I could add something? So for instance, on mine, I see a little bit of emptiness over here. I think it'd be kind of fun to make one of my leaves from my lily come down over here on this side, and that helps me fill in a little bit more of that space. What are some other things that you could do to help fill in space? Could you draw some tall pieces of grass coming up in your garden? Would that be okay? Totally. What else could you draw in your flower garden to help fill up some of that empty space? Maybe that empty space looks good to you. You just kind of have to decide what works for you. I noticed that I did not add in my little dots around my sunflower over here, okay? Now, if I had a lot more space in my sky, I could fill in things like butterflies, dragonflies, bumblebees, hanging out up here. Or if I wanted to add small things like maybe little ladybugs that are hanging out on the petal, then I could work on things like that, all right? Think about what size they would be in comparison to your flowers. Once you get the drawing part done, you are free to color this, paint this, however you like. Now, I wanted to show you what it looks like if you turn your paper horizontally or wide like a fish tank. And so I drew a flower garden this direction, and I'm using some watercolor paints I had at home to paint it in. So one option is to paint it. If you do want to paint it, then you need to use a permanent marker to trace it or outline your drawing. You don't want to use the same washable black marker that I used to draw the other drawing, because if you try to paint on top of this, the black will bleed and spread into your paint. If you want to paint it, I suggest either tracing it with a permanent marker or not tracing it at all, or you can even use a crayon to outline it. Okay, so here I am with this finished painting of my flower garden. One thing I thought I might mention to you is that roses really grow on a bush. So we're kind of using our imaginations to imagine these tall stems with the roses on them, but that is totally okay. We can do that, can't we? Now, I have one other optional step for you guys, just another idea. Remember, when you're an artist, you come up with all kinds of ideas, and you may want to do something different than I want to do, but I wanted to show you one other thing. So I thought it might be kind of cool to make it look like these flowers are growing behind a fence. And if you want to do that too, I'll show you an easy way that you can make that happen. So we had an old cereal box that we just finished, and it was actually pretty good. Have you tried this cereal? But anyway, what you can do with this is you can use this cardboard because it's very thin. I've just flattened out the box. Let me scoot this out of the way. And you can use the cardboard from this to make little fence posts. So I'll show you how to do that. I'm just gonna cut the box so that I can get one piece of it. Let me just cut this off. Okay, now I can actually use the blank side to create my fence posts. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna cut some lines that are the same space apart. So I'm trying to make them the same width every time I cut, and then we'll get all their heights the same in just a minute, okay? So making them, I don't know how many I'm gonna need, so I'm just cutting a few the same width apart, and then I'm just gonna go down the line and trim them off. Oop, it looks like I didn't quite cut high enough on these, but I can fix that really easily. And just, whoops. and cut these off to be my little fence posts. Okay, so now I don't know how many I'm gonna need. I can cut more in just a minute. So what you can do is you can have, let me put this back. You can have fence posts that are flat on the top like this, and you can make them as thin as you want. You could space them out. Now it's gonna cover up some of your flowers, and that's okay, but what you might want to do is kind of place them down so that they're not right directly on top of flowers. You can kind of play with it before you glue them. So you can leave them straight like this, or something else you could do is you could use your scissors to cut a triangle shape. I have a fence in my backyard that has a triangle shape on the top. We call that a picket fence. And so, oops, it's a little bit still wet there. I'm trying to be careful. So what you can do is cut these how you want, and then you can space them out across your page. I'll show you what that might look like. Okay, so here are these all spaced apart, and I have not glued them down yet. It's always a good idea to lay things out before you glue them down to make sure they're gonna work. But I think this looks really nice. So I've spaced them out, and I will glue them down in just a minute. But before I do that, I wanted to show you how to make a little crossbar across your fence. So I'm still gonna use my cereal box, and I'm going to just cut a long thin piece. I don't know if you can see this over here where I'm cutting. I'm kind of afraid to move this. Maybe I can just scoot it gently. There we go. I'm going to just cut a long thin piece, and I don't know how long I will need yet until I measure it against my paper. If your box is not long enough to go across your paper when you cut your piece, you can always cut another thin piece and just glue it side by side. Okay, so there's my long thin piece, and now I can see about how long I'm gonna need it, and then I will just trim off what I do not need, okay? And then when I glue this down, I will just glue it across like so. I think that looks really, really cool. What do you guys think? That's just one other little bonus thing that you can do to finish your picture. All right, that was so much fun making that with you today. So here is my final product after I put the fence down on there. Do you like it? I think that looks pretty cool, and you get to decide if you want to do that or do something else all together with your flower garden. So you probably are gonna have some practice pages, and you're also going to have your finished piece, and you can even take your practice pages and do something really fun with it. Guys, you can take these flowers and you can put them in a vase. You can draw a vase of whatever shape, and you can make this project totally your own. Thank you so much for creating with me today, and I will see you all again next week.